All right, let's jump right in. Today we're tackling something pretty big, pornography addiction.
Yeah, it's a huge issue, and it's something that, um, you know, a lot of people struggle with.
Definitely. And we've got a really fascinating source to guide us. It's a Christian Bible study guide that's all about understanding this addiction and overcoming it.
And what's really cool about this source is, even if the religious angle isn't really your thing,
Yeah.
there's still so much in here that applies to everyone.
Mm.
Just in terms of understanding the addiction and recovery.
Right, absolutely. It's really about human nature, I think, more than anything. So
Yeah.
to kick things off, I gotta share this one stat that blew my mind. Get
hmm
this. The porn industry, it actually rakes in more money than all professional sports franchises combined.
Wow. Yeah, that's insane when you think about it.
I know, right? It's a massive
It
industry.
really shows you how pervasive it is.
Right. For sure. And one thing that this source digs into, which I have found really insightful, is the idea that addiction, any addiction really, is often rooted in these deep-seated beliefs we have about ourselves.
It's like these underlying insecurities and faulty thinking patterns that make us vulnerable.
Yeah, and this source really lays that out in a way that I think is going to resonate with a lot of people, regardless of their background.
Definitely. And it kind of ties into this whole thing about how technology has just made porn so incredibly accessible these
Oh
days.
yeah, it's everywhere. It's inescapable almost.
Right. And that just plays right into these vulnerabilities that the source is talking about.
So let's kind of define our terms here. When we say pornography, what exactly do we mean?
So this source defines it as basically any material. It could be pictures, videos, even writing
Hmm.
that's sexually explicit and meant to arouse you.
Okay, so pretty straightforward.
Yeah, and they really emphasize how this whole technology thing, it's just blown this issue wide open. It's
Yeah.
it's led to a huge surge in addiction rates because it's so easily accessible.
It's like you said, it's so pervasive, it's hard to even avoid at times. And I think a lot of us can relate to this feeling of being powerless against something, even if it's not porn specifically.
Yeah, definitely.
The source actually uses this fictional character, Jeff, to illustrate this, and he's just desperate to quit looking at porn, but he can't seem to stop himself. It's like this overwhelming urge that he just can't fight.
And that's really at the core of any addiction, right? This feeling of powerlessness.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I found really interesting is that even the secular world is starting to catch on to the harmful effects of porn.
Yeah, it's becoming more and more recognized as a legitimate problem.
Right. Like
Yeah.
the source mentions yourbrainonporn.com as an example of how awareness is growing beyond just, religious communities.
It's becoming more of a public health concern, really.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So it's not just a moral issue anymore. It's like people are realizing, hey, this can actually mess you up.
Exactly.
Mhm.
And while the source definitely emphasizes this relationship with God for overcoming addiction,
Right.
they also acknowledge, the secular concerns about how porn impacts relationships, self-esteem, even, sexual performance.
Yeah. It's not just about avoiding, sin. It's about actually having a healthier, happier life
Exactly.
overall. Okay, so let's get into like the nitty-gritty, the science of this. What makes porn so addictive in the first place?
So think of it this way. Your brain, it's like a highway system,
Yeah.
right? Every time you look at porn, it's like you're paving a new lane specifically for that pleasure response.
Okay, I like that analogy.
And the more you travel down that lane, the smoother, the wider it gets.
So it's getting even.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it becomes harder to take any other route.
Yeah.
This is because, porn, it triggers this flood of dopamine in the brain, the feel-good chemical,
Yeah.
and your brain gets wired to crave more and more of that dopamine hit.
So it's literally rewiring you over time.
Exactly.
It's like how some people they get hooked on sugary foods, you
Yeah.
know? It's that quick hit of pleasure.
Yeah, it's the same principle. The brain, it doesn't really differentiate between, what's giving it that dopamine rush.
It just wants more, more, more.
Exactly. And to really understand how this cycle starts, the source gets into the work of Dr. Patrick Carnes. He's a leading expert on sexual addiction.
Okay, yeah.
And he identified these four core beliefs that are often at the root of addiction.
Interesting.
And they are: I am basically a bad, unworthy person. No one would love me as I am.
Mm.
My needs will never be met if I have to depend on others. And sex is my most important need.
Wow. Those are heavy. And I bet a lot of people listening right now might recognize those beliefs in themselves or people they know.
Definitely. And it's not always even related to porn. These are just like these underlying beliefs about ourselves that can lead to a lot of unhealthy behaviors.
Yeah, it's so true. It's amazing how much our thoughts shape our actions, even if we're not, consciously aware of those thoughts.
Absolutely.
So once those beliefs are kind of there, like how does the addiction actually take hold?
Okay, so the source it outlines this four-step progression based on Dr. Victor Klein's research.
Okay.
And it starts with that initial exposure to porn, right? That's the first step, addiction. It creates this powerful sexual stimulant effect, often leading to release through masturbation.
So are you telling me that like one glimpse of porn and that's enough to get you hooked for life?
Well, not necessarily, but it can definitely set the stage for a dangerous escalation. Think about it. Like you eat a piece of chocolate cake, right?
Hmm.
It's delicious. Next time you might want two pieces. Or maybe you start craving something even richer, even sweeter.
Oh, I see where you're going with this.
Yeah, in porn, it can work
Yeah.
the same way. The brain, it wants that dopamine hit. And over time, it needs a bigger and bigger dose to get the same effect. That's the second step, escalation.
It's kind of scary how what we consider normal can shift so easily.
Yeah. That leads to the third step, desensitization.
Mm.
What was once shocking, it
Hmm.
becomes normal. And that can actually lead to problems in healthy sexual relationships because your perception is skewed.
So it starts to affect your real life interactions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that can culminate in the fourth step,
Mm.
acting out. The source, they highlight this increased tendency for addicts to act out behaviors they've witnessed in pornography, which could even include, violence.
That's a chilling thought. And the source mentioned that something like 70 to 90% of sexual addicts, it all started with pornography.
It's a slippery slope.
It really is. It makes you think about how these seemingly harmless actions can lead you down this really dangerous path. Now let's shift gears a bit and explore the spiritual perspective that the source offers on overcoming addiction.
Okay, so this is where the concept of being a slave to sin comes in. The
Mhm.
source, from its Christian viewpoint,
Hmm.
it talks about these three slave masters that,
Mm.
that keep us trapped. Human nature, the world, and Satan.
Okay, I know those terms might not click with everyone listening,
Yeah.
but I think we can kind of reframe them in a way that makes sense, regardless of your beliefs.
Yeah, absolutely.
So instead of human nature, think about like our natural urges and impulses. The world that can be seen as the pressure and influence of society and the media, especially the messages we absorb about, sex and relationships. And Satan, well, let's think of him as like the embodiment of our negative thoughts and self-sabotaging behaviors. Those voices in our heads that tell us we're not good enough.
That's a really helpful way to bridge the gap. Yeah.
Yeah.
And while the source is, rooted in faith, it draws a lot from the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, which have been adapted for sexual addiction recovery.
And the interesting thing about those 12 steps is that while they do have, spiritual elements, they also align with a lot of modern therapy techniques.
Absolutely. They
Right.
focus on self-awareness, acceptance, and building a support system.
It's about acknowledging that you need support, beyond yourself, whether that's a therapist, a group, or even just, a close friend.
Right. You're actively seeking out those positive influences.
Exactly. Yeah. And the source talks about, seeking help from a higher power, which again, that can be interpreted in all sorts of ways beyond, a traditional God.
Yeah, it's about finding what works for you and tapping into that source of strength.
Whether it's, therapy, a support group, your own inner resilience, or something else entirely.
Exactly. It's about finding your own path to recovery.
Yeah, absolutely. So once you've kind of recognized the problem and you've started to seek help, what are some practical strategies for actually breaking free from pornography addiction?
Well, the source, it really digs into this concept of triggers.
Hmm.
Anything that sparks that urge to look at porn.
Okay,
And,
yeah.
and identifying those triggers, that's crucial for preventing relapse.
Right. So what are some common triggers?
Well, the source breaks them down into three main categories:
Right.
emotional, electronic, and visual. So emotional triggers, these are things like boredom, stress, loneliness, even feeling happy. Basically, any strong emotion can be a trigger.
It's like how we reach for our phones, or
Yeah.
or turn to comfort food when we're feeling down or stressed.
Exactly. It's the same idea with pornography. It becomes a way to cope with difficult emotions.
Mm. What about electronic triggers?
Well, those are pretty self-explanatory. Computers, smartphones, tablets, anything with internet access.
Makes
Yeah.
sense.
And then there are visual triggers, which, these could be anything from seeing like a suggestive image to someone dressed
It's
provocatively.
these triggers are everywhere in our culture.
Exactly. And it's not always easy to avoid them.
Right, right. So once you've identified your triggers, like what can you actually do about them?
Well, the source offers some really practical advice.
Hmm.
For emotional triggers, it recommends finding healthier ways to cope with negative feelings. Things like exercise, nutrition, counseling, leaning on your support system.
Those sound like good strategies for anyone,
Yeah,
honestly.
they really are. And for electronic triggers, they suggest using software filters,
Mm.
having accountability partners, and limiting your access to technology, especially during, vulnerable times.
So being proactive and setting those boundaries for yourself.
Exactly. And for visual triggers, it's all about practicing self-control, avoiding lingering looks, practicing what they call bouncing of the eyes.
Bouncing of the eyes.
Yeah, it means like quickly looking away from something tempting.
Oh, okay, interesting. So a little bit of mental maneuvering to redirect your attention.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think this is a good point for everyone listening to kind of reflect. What are your potential triggers? And even more importantly, what are some practical solutions that you can start using in your daily life? It could be, unsubscribing from certain email lists or putting your phone in another room at night. It's all about finding what works for you.
Absolutely. So, as we move into talking about some practical strategies,
Yeah.
I think it's important to highlight this thing the source keeps coming back to, this idea of being proactive.
Yeah.
It's not just about like white knuckling it through temptation.
Yeah.
It's about actually building a life that supports recovery.
Right. It's like you're setting yourself up for success rather than just constantly reacting to urges.
Exactly, yeah. And a big part of that, according to the source, is spiritual growth. Now, before you tune out, hear me out, okay?
Okay.
The source, it draws a lot from the Apostle James, who talks about, submitting to a higher power, resisting temptation, and getting closer to God.
And I think even if organized religion isn't your thing, you can still apply those principles.
Oh, absolutely.
It's about recognizing that you need support beyond yourself, whether that's a therapist, a group, or even just, a close friend.
Yeah.
You're actively seeking out those positive influences and building habits that make you more resilient.
That's a great point. And the source talks about starting each day with a positive mindset. They suggest prayer and Bible study, but again, we can adapt that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's meditation, journaling, or just taking a few minutes to think about your goals for the day. Anything that centers you and helps you focus on what really matters.
Like prepping yourself mentally and emotionally before you step out into the world.
Exactly. And when those inevitable moments of temptation do arise, remember you don't have to fight alone. The source, they talk about the power of prayer, but we can also think of it as reaching out for support, whether that's, calling a friend, going to a meeting, or even just reminding yourself of the progress you've already made.
It's about tapping into your inner strength and remembering that you're not the only one going through this.
Right.
Speaking of support, the source mentions some incredible resources for people who are struggling with porn addiction. They highlight Celebrate Recovery, which is a Christian 12-step program
Oh, yeah.
that addresses all sorts of addictions, including sexual ones.
And even if, you're not religious, Celebrate Recovery,
Yeah.
it offers this sense of community and shared understanding that can be incredibly healing.
Yeah.
You're connecting with people who've been there, who get it,
Right.
and can offer that support and encouragement.
It's like having this whole team of cheerleaders in your corner reminding you that recovery is possible.
Absolutely. And beyond support groups, the source also recommends, professional help,
Yeah.
especially if you're dealing with with deeper issues like trauma or mental health challenges.
Yeah, therapy can be so powerful in helping you unpack those underlying causes of addiction and develop healthier ways of coping. The source also recommends a couple books that might be helpful.
Oh yeah.
Being God's Man in the Face of Temptation by Stephen Arterburn,
Okay.
and At the Altar of Sexual Idolatry by Steve Gallagher.
I've heard of that one.
Yeah, so both of those are written from a Christian perspective, but they offer these insights into temptation and practical strategies for resisting it
Yeah.
that could be, valuable for anyone, really.
Right.
And of course there are tons of other books and resources out there, both religious and secular.
Yeah.
The important thing is to find what resonates with you and provides the guidance you need. It's about giving yourself the tools and the knowledge to fight this battle effectively. One thing that really stuck with me from the source was the emphasis on the ripple effect of pornography addiction. It's not just about you.
Right.
It impacts relationships, families, even future generations.
Yeah, that's so important. The source, they specifically talk about, the harm that porn addiction can cause to spouses and the damage it can do to marriages.
Yeah.
And it also asks, like, what kind of legacy are we leaving for our kids and grandkids? Are we modeling healthy relationships and behaviors, or are we passing down our struggles and unhealthy patterns?
Those are some tough questions to ask, but essential if we want to break the cycle of addiction and create a healthier future for ourselves and the people we love. So let's get into some more strategies for navigating those tricky electronic triggers, especially in today's digital world.
Yeah, the source has some really practical advice here. They suggest things like installing filtering software on your computer and phone to block, access to porn sites.
Like putting parental controls on yourself.
Exactly.
Uh-huh.
And they also recommend finding an accountability partner.
Hmm.
This could be, a trusted friend, family member, or even a therapist who you check in with regularly
Yeah.
and who can provide that support and encouragement.
It's about having someone who knows your struggles and can help you, stay on track.
Absolutely. Another thing they mention is limiting your exposure to technology, especially during times when you're feeling vulnerable. Maybe that means, not using your phone or computer in bed, or setting, specific time limits for social media.
Being mindful of those triggers and setting boundaries to protect yourself. The source also emphasizes finding healthy outlets for your energy and emotions. Things like, exercise, hobbies, spending time in nature, and connecting with loved ones.
All fantastic ways to boost your mood, reduce stress, and just build a more fulfilling life that doesn't rely on pornography for escape.
It's about filling your life with positive experiences and relationships that nourish you.
Exactly.
One final thought from the source that I found really powerful is this idea of reflecting on the pain and suffering that our actions might be causing others, especially those closest to us.
Hmm.
It's a reminder that our choices don't just affect us; they have this ripple effect on the people we love.
That's a powerful message. It's a call to compassion,
Yeah.
for ourselves and for others, and it's a reminder that recovery is not just about, personal gain, but about creating a healthier, more loving world for everyone.
And on that note, we'll wrap up part 2 of our deep dive into overcoming pornography addiction.
Sounds good.
Be sure to join us for the final part where we'll explore some additional resources and leave you with some final thoughts and key takeaways.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. As we wrap up our exploration of overcoming pornography addiction, I just want to acknowledge, how tough this journey can be. It's not easy facing something this challenging, and it takes a lot of courage to even, start the process.
Yeah, no, it's true. It takes a tremendous amount of strength to confront this, especially with all the stigma that surrounds it.
You're absolutely right. And while we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. There's so much more to learn, and the source provides some additional resources for anyone who wants to kind of go further.
Yeah, there's some great links they point to, like breaking-free.ucg.org.
Yeah.
They've got a whole journal with more articles on overcoming all sorts of addictions. And remember yourbrainonporn.com, which we talked about earlier. That website is an excellent resource for understanding the science behind porn addiction and how it affects your brain.
Hmm. They also list some books that could be helpful, like Pure Eyes by Craig Gross, Surfing for God, Discovering the Divine Desire Beneath Sexual Struggle by Michael John Cusick,
Yeah.
and Growing in Christ While Helping Others by John Baker.
And don't forget those organizations we discussed, like Celebrate Recovery and Sex Addicts Anonymous. They offer, invaluable support and a sense of community for people who are on the road to recovery.
It's important to remember that you don't have to go through this alone. There are people out there who understand what you're going through and want to help.
Exactly. And as we kind of wrap up, I keep thinking about one of the final thoughts from the source. It's a simple but powerful message.
Yeah.
Think about the kind of legacy you want to leave behind, not just for yourself, but for future generations.
It's about recognizing that ripple effect we talked about,
Yeah.
how our actions impact others.
Mm.
And it's about trying to create a world where healthy relationships and increased intimacy can thrive.
What a great way to put it. Recovery is possible. It takes courage, it takes commitment, and it takes support, but it's a journey worth taking. So if you're struggling with pornography addiction, please reach out for help. You don't have to face this alone.
And never forget, there is hope. You have the power to break free and create a life, filled with joy and meaning and genuine connection. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for listening, everyone.